Welcome back to Gary's in the Shed. Now, like most people, I have always loved movies. Not all of them, of course. My taste in film has never been very sophisticated, nothing too arty. I'm attracted mostly to the popular commercial movies. And today, I'd like to celebrate what I think is the greatest film of them all. Some of you may have noticed my obsession with the early Star Wars films. Always a big fan of the work of director George Lucas, whose vision and attention to detail made Star Wars such a global phenomenon. And that all resulting in my nerdy fascination with making Star Wars props, things like lots of weapons, many different helmets, and even the head of a Tusken Raider. But it's not George Lucas we're focused on today. We're talking about the work of the great Steven Spielberg, who's been making hit films since 1959. Measured by box office receipts, Steven Spielberg is the highest grossing director in cinematic history. I had the privilege of meeting him once. Now, I've met a lot of important people over the years, but in this case, I was genuinely starstruck. Steven Spielberg was giving us some tips on a big film studio construction project we'd just started near London. He was generous with his time, and if I didn't already admire this guy, I certainly did then. I won't go through the whole list of his films, but focus on a remarkable 5-year period in which he delivered 3 of my favourite movies ever. He never won a Best Picture Oscar for any one of these productions, but they were all international blockbusters. In 1977, he made Close Encounters of the Third Kind. In 1981, Raiders of the Lost Ark. And in 1982, he created the picture I want to celebrate today, E.T. the Extra-Terrestrial. I think E.T. was Steven Spielberg at his very best. A simple story with just the right amount of tension. No big-name stars, but believable characters and brilliant attention to detail. For example, it was the best representation of a child's bedroom with complete authenticity. The film is 44 years old, but it works just as well today. The themes were timeless. A single mother struggling with 3 active kids, an innocent challenge to excessive authority, and the powerful idea of friendship with a stranger. E.T. certainly qualifies for that. And then the odd mix of the pain and the pleasure of having to say goodbye. I could go on and on about how perfectly structured this film is, but let's get on with today's project. I wanted to build something for the shed that would always remind me of E.T. And of course, that meant I had to go some way to recreating probably the most iconic motion picture scene ever made. Here it is. Young Elliot escaping the authorities with the help of E.T. riding his BMX bike past the moon. Steven Spielberg so loved that image, it's part of the logo for his production company, Amblin Entertainment. So off we go on another project. But where to start? Well, that first step was the bike. I've never ridden one of these before. When I was a kid, BMX was a brand new thing. Only the rich kids had one of these. Once I'd finished playing with it, the BMX didn't need a lot of work, just to clean up, paint the tyres black, and then figuring out how this is all going to work. The idea was to attach a basket just like Elliot's, to the front of the bike. It didn't have to carry much weight, but it needed to be stable because I wanted to mount a small 6-volt motor to turn the front wheel. Important to make sure it got the wheel turning in the right direction. Then, with lots of measurements, time to start making a plan. I wanted 4 points connecting the support structure to the bike, starting with the handlebars bracket at the top, and then 2 struts connecting to the front forks just above the axle. The hardest part was this, a bracket to hold the electric motor in place. The whole thing consisted of 6 parts, and in order to be sure that the more complex parts were going to fit, I used cardboard to make templates before starting any cutting of the metal. Then, after a bit of trial and error, transferred the templates to the metal ready for cutting. With each piece cut, I could then bend the pieces into shape. And here are all the finished parts, ready for paint and installation. I used 2 different gauges of steel. The strongest at 2 millimeters was for the main vertical support and the legs to the axle, and lighter steel at 1.3 millimeters for the rest of the structure. I wanted to complete this project without any welding, just to prove that with projects that are relatively lightweight, there's no need for welding. These pot rivets are definitely strong enough. They're cheap and they're easy to use. So if you have a lightweight project, whether in steel or aluminium, rivets are a very good solution. Meanwhile, there was a bit of work to do on the basket itself, making sure it could be firmly attached to the support system and to accommodate the electric motor. Then, of course, what to do about E.T. First, I definitely wanted to see E.T.'s hand appearing over the front of the basket. So I started making his hand, first using 5mm aluminium wire to bend the shape of each finger. And for the index finger, I needed to attach a small LED light and run the wiring back along the finger. That worked out pretty well. Then I used this modelling clay to sculpt the shape of the fingers. This stuff is great to work with. The clay is water soluble, so you can achieve a nice smooth finish. As I was doing this, I kept thinking about what other sculpting projects I could do some other time. And here's what it looked like with the LED connected. It's great when these things work out. The whole hand looks like this, not yet painted, of course, and will sit at the front of the basket as E.T.'s right hand. The tricky part was how to present E.T. himself. Now, I spent a lot of time on the internet searching for a life-sized model, but they were either too small or just way too expensive. In the end, I found this, a latex mask that dedicated fans of E.T. use for costume parties. So here it is, the latex mask has arrived, and there is E.T. Now, don't worry, I'm not going to try it on. I'd never live that down if I did. So how are we going to make that work? Well, I've been working with polystyrene blocks to make this. This is a polystyrene head that I had in the workshop, and I think it's going to be ideal. So I'm going to apply a little bit of padding on these cheeks here, and that will help me give a good shape to E.T. So let's try it. Let's see if we can get E.T. on the model. It takes a bit of effort to put him on there, but that is starting to look about right, and I just tighten it up a little bit with some clips here at the back, and then we will have the beginnings of E.T. sitting in Elliot's basket. But before we move on, I thought it was time to recognize someone really special in this story. He's the Italian effects artist Carlo Rambaldi, who designed and built the many E.T. models for the film, including all the complicated mechanics to animate the character. He won 3 Academy Awards for his work on King Kong, Alien, and of course for E.T. Carlo Rambaldi passed away in 2012, and just last year he was awarded a star on Hollywood's Walk of Fame. Quite right too. Now let's get back to the project, and we're just about ready to put the whole thing together. The 6 parts for the support system for the basket are now down to 3. The main bracket to be attached to the handlebars, and the 2 struts that connect to the front forks. First, we firmly attach the bracket. It took a while to get this right because we have to have the wheel of the electric motor touching the front wheel of the bike at just the right pressure. That's controlled by the forward struts mounted to the front of the basket. And I decided to add a red LED to hint at that red glow from E.T.'s chest. It's interesting, I had to steal a small plastic box from Angelica's kitchen, paint it red, insert an LED, and produce that nice red glow. Don't tell Angelica I stole her plastic box. So with that done, we can introduce the star of the show. And then finally add the blanket used to hide E.T. from all the authorities. Now we're ready to put the whole thing in position. I wanted to suspend the bike from one of the wooden beams in the ceiling of the shed. And I was already familiar with this bike hanging system, so that seemed about right. Now, I hope this works. So we've got it in place now, and I'm pretty happy with where it is, but we're not quite finished because we need to see if it's going to work. So we'll switch it on and hope for the best. Let's see. Well, a few things to tweak, a few things to change, but I think it's done. So there it is. Not exactly Steven Spielberg standard, but certainly good enough for the shed. And before we go, here is a reminder of why we all love this film so much. Are you ready?
ET phone here? We'll have to walk from here. E.T., stay with me. I'll be right here.
My thanks to our friends at Universal Pictures for permission to use that video. This project has been a labour of love for me. Now I'll have my favourite extraterrestrial right here in the shed. And just one more thing to say. E.T., come back.
E.T., stay with me. I'll be right here.